If you're a high-achieving woman who's exhausted by stress, stuck in constant conflict, and tired of being overlooked in the exact rooms where you know you were born to lead, then this podcast is for you. So here's your host, Pallavi Jain.
Welcome to Her Boss Brain, where we go beyond external success and tap into the inner technology that drives how you think, lead, and show up under pressure. Because success isn't just about doing more, it's about knowing how to lead yourself when it matters the most. And today we're diving into a question that most high achievers avoid. What happens when you get everything you thought you wanted and it still doesn't feel like enough? In a world that rewards constant growth, ambition, and output, many leaders never stop to define what enough actually means for them. And without that clarity, success can quietly turn into pressure, burnout, and disconnection. Joining me today is Erika Glenn, a dear friend, a C suite executive, keynote speaker, and strategic advisor. With nearly 2 decades of leadership across health systems, Fortune 4 companies, and high growth startups, she has led teams of nearly 1,000 professionals and has overseen annual revenue exceeding $260 million. Her work has always served one goal: better health outcomes for real people. As Chief Operating Officer of Cecilia Health right now, she builds the operational infrastructure, helping people with diabetes and heart disease get the proactive care they deserve. Also, a two-time TEDx speaker with millions of views. With her popular talks, The Secret to Being Successful and The Art of Living Up are challenging high achievers to lead and teach through deep connection. Erica believes the best leaders don't just grow organizations, they change lives. And what makes her perspective, from my vantage point, different is this: she's not just focused on achieving success, she's focused on sustaining it. And that matters. So, in this conversation, we explore the shift from external achievement to internal clarity, what it really takes to define success on your own terms, and how to lead with intention, boundaries, and connection in high pressure environments. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about how far you go, it's about how you show up along the way. So, let's get into it. And I really want to welcome you here. Thank you for joining us, Erica.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to finally get to do this with you. I know we've been talking about it for a while, so it's exciting to do it.
Yes, absolutely. And since your TED Talk has been really breaking all the records, and I love your TED Talk, so let's start there. So, we're talking about your first TED Talk, The Secret to Being Successful, and it has resonated with millions of people, right? So, do you think most high achievers actually know what enough is for them?
I actually don't think most of them know. It's always the next or the best or the greatest or
Right.
this role, then that role. Oh, I got to go here instead. And so I think it is a common problem that a lot of executives run into at some point to say, okay, what now? What else?
Yeah, yeah. And you have operated at the highest levels, right? Large teams, high growth. So, at what point did you realize that chasing success without defining that enough, it really comes at a cost?
Yeah, so I had about 850 folks underneath me. I was running about 6 products, building 2 more, and all kinds of different functions and features. I had it all, but in seeing that I had it all, I was not happy. I was incredibly unhappy, and I couldn't figure it out. I was like, this is what I've asked for. This is what I always wanted. What is wrong? And I think a big portion for me was I couldn't see the impact. When you get to certain levels, especially on a corporate level, the politics become your whole life. And so, like, you don't actually get to see the impact of what you're doing, how it's bettering people's lives. And that matters to me.
So, when that was happening, take us into that moment because you've given us this example. What was really going through your mind when all of that was happening in front of you?
So, what was going through my mind? So, I have asthma. I kept getting sick, bronchitis, pneumonia, all kinds of things. So, I'm running 3 cities a week,
Yeah.
flying 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. I'm running as fast as I can, sleeping about 4 hours a night. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what I always wanted. Like, why am I so unhappy? I keep getting sick. I can't stay well. How does this end? I kept thinking to myself, like, I can't go out and tell everybody that
Right.
this isn't making me happy. Like, how does this end?
Yeah.
And, it ended by me being in the hospital 6 different times within 2023.
Wow.
And that was a huge wake up call for me to say, okay, this has to be sustainable. Whatever I have to do, whatever I do in life and what I choose has to be sustainable. Not to mention the impact it had to my family
Of
and not
course.
being present with them. So it was a kind of a surround sound of, I got to keep doing more. I got to keep achieving, but I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I'm sick. I can't see impact. I'm fighting all the time, not enjoying life. How do I get out of this?
Oh my goodness. And just listening to this, it's such so disappointing because you're putting your heart and soul into something. Knowing you, I know how committed you are in making that impact happen and not being able to actually see that and being driven in this, all the things that you're doing. And what you're pointing to is something I see a lot as well. Externally, everything looks successful, but internally, there's no clear definition of that enough. So the system, just keeps running, kind of what you're saying, right? So you now talk about being clear and about what matters. And we have had discussions about that, like your family, right? So again, how did you make that pivot happen after this happened in 2023? What really forced you after that? Or how did you go about confronting it? Because we have our own kind of self dialogue of, no, everybody else is doing it. And this false sense that we think that everything else have it under control, which they don't. So walk us through your journey. Like what pivoted? How did you make that change happen?
So, hospital visit number three, as we were coming out, my husband was with me for five. One, I was on the road and had to go to the hospital. But as we were walking out, he said to me, I'm so mad at you. Like, I'm trying not to be mad at you because I know you're sick, but you've done this to yourself. Erica, when is enough enough? And I knew what was going on behind the scenes, but I had not had anybody directly ask me, like, okay, when are you going to think it's enough and stop or slow down and take care of yourself? And that moment changed a lot in my mind of like, I don't know what's next. I don't know what is enough. I don't know when I believe I will be enough to satisfy the need. And that went on for, I'll be honest, it was not a quick pivot. I pivoted
Yeah.
slightly, definitely put my family face forward because I was told by physicians at that point, if you keep going like you're going, it will kill you. Like you can't sustain what you're doing. And so, at those moments, you have a glimmer of like, what's the most important things to me? And my family really started coming first and foremost, as they should have the whole time. In addition, I ended up exiting a large organization, went to a startup, came out of that pretty fast. And I had about 8 months to sit with myself and really heal and try to figure it out. And so it took those 8 months to realize that I had really tied my worth, my self-value, like all the value and worth that I
Yeah.
had to my job.
Yeah.
And so during that 8 months, I had to do a lot of work from a nervous system perspective and everything else to understand, okay, this is not my worth. Yes, it's a part of me. The results are there, but the results are not directly tied to worth. And so it was a lot of quiet moments and uncomfortable quiet moments because I didn't want to sit in the stillness, but that's what it required for me to get very clear on what was next.
It's just so powerful what you just shared because I think it is so important when so successful women like you, they come up and they tell their story. It really gives that permission to a lot of other women and actually executives, including men, who are kind of in this rat race and they feel like everything else have it together. I'm the one who's falling behind and kind of putting your worth on that title. And once that title goes away, then what, right? And I think you also pointed something important that we talk here in this space a lot about, sitting in that silence and how uncomfortable that can be at times because we are so used to this overstimulation all the time and that instant gratification of, okay, you send the message, you want the result right now, and, just a buzz of all these things happening. And I know this has really helped you just going through that journey and how you have created some frameworks around that to also help people. So I really would like you to share your three powerful questions, which I believe are amazing that you shared in your TED Talk. And can you walk us through those and how they actually show up in your life today? Walk us through that.
Yeah, so I think it's really about it's listening to yourself and listening to that inner dialogue. So asking yourself, you know, am I happy? Thinking about your body, like what is your body telling you? What are your loved ones telling you? And at the end of the day, we're all going to die. Are you going to be okay dying tomorrow and be able to look back and say you did enough? So it's really the powerful combination of thinking about, am I sick? Am I tired? Like, what's going on with that? the people around me are signaling things. I came home from a trip one week and my son didn't even talk to me for a whole weekend, didn't even act like I existed. He was signaling to me that I wasn't making him a priority, and it was too painful for me to be in and out all the time. I should have picked up on that a long time ago. So there are people, friends, your spouse, your children that will show you these things if you pay attention or are present enough. And then you have to do a lot of the questioning to understand, like, how present are you with the things going on around you? And like I said, will you be okay if you die tomorrow with how you have shown up for your people, whether it be work or whether it be personal?
So powerful and so deep. And you're absolutely right. You have all that intelligence within you. It's just a matter of tapping into that. And then I completely agree with you because, these questions force you to pause. And without that pause, we default to that autopilot that we talk here a lot. And that's where most high achievers actually get stuck, right? Because it's always what's next, what's coming next. And another thing just came to my mind because I get asked this question a lot, even when I'm doing my workshops, is so we are asking them to pause. We are asking people to really introspect of what they really want. And sometimes what you're doing is maybe you don't want that. And you are a high achiever. And we are unfortunately, in workplaces where high achievers and those kind of people do excel, like, from the success, whatever we have defined success as. So, how do you still kind of maneuver your way through that without losing yourself? And I would love to have your take on that since, you've had such a great journey into this.
I think it's really about, I'm still not great with boundaries, but I'm getting much
Yes.
better.
Yes.
So, for example, before I came to Cecilia Health, there were a couple things. I even talked about potentially coming in as a sales leader, which is what they originally called me for. And I turned it down. And I turned it down because I knew I couldn't travel at the degree in which I would need to be successful. And so that was a boundary. Another boundary was my son's in private school. I have to pick him up in the afternoons. If I'm not traveling, I've got to find somewhere that will allow me to take calls in the car while I'm on my way to pick up my son. It's about defining, and there's many others, but those are a couple examples of really defining what are those hard boundaries of things you have to do or things that you have to be. And then you start framing your time. So that's another big boundary of making sure you have that quality time with your folks. And then also, then you start layering in as a leader, how am I showing up? Is my team culture good? What can I
Yeah.
do to make it better? And then you look at your KPIs because I'm an operator after all, at least right now I am. So looking at the numbers, because if you listen to my TED Talk, you'll hear I'm a numbers person, looking at
Yes.
those numbers, but then determining what's most important and defining that and transformation of that, and then looking at the numbers after. So it's, to me, it's a combination of all three. As you well know, my career has been quite a journey with a lot of different pivots. So I look for the career arc. It's not always just the best or the next. Sometimes you go sideways, sometimes you go down to go up. You have to be mindful, especially once you get to that C-suite level.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think kind of what you're saying is, if I have to put it in our terms that we use here, is that self-leadership and intentionality. Because you already mentioned the pause, which is, we also tackle the ATM framework here. So arriving in that moment and then taking responsibility is the next step. And knowing what truly matters to you, right? Because once you know that inner clarity of what it matters to you, then you can take those proactive steps. And like you said, those small steps matter because that's how you show up in your day to day for yourself and for the people around you. So, yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you for that. And since we're talking about self leadership, and I know you believe in that a lot, and that self leadership, that inner leadership, and why it is critical, especially in this overstimulated world we live in. So, when everything is moving so fast, and pressure is high, and it's going to get worse as AI and everything is coming in, what does self leadership look like for you, for your teams, and what do you do internally before you respond externally?
So hustle culture is real. It's not going away. And you can stop it and put the brakes on it and then find yourself right back in it. That is what happened when I went to the first startup that I went to. And it was all on me, first of all, just because I run hard. I think it's really important to have self-leadership to know things about yourself. Like, okay, I'm speeding up too much. Okay, now I'm dreaming about work. Something needs to give. And things that you can do to help with that are things like breathing makes all the difference to me. I'm not a big yoga person, or I don't proclaim to do all these different things, but just some breathing exercises really help me to slow it down. But the key to all that is, to your point, intentionality, being present and knowing, okay, I've gone up to 65 hours this week. That may be, we need to cap it there. We need to figure out how we stay there, go back down, whatever your number is. I
Yes.
was up at 80, which is totally
Wow.
unhealthy.
Yeah.
But you have to figure out how to step it down, whether that be 40, whether that be 60, whether that be something else. So knowing when to step it down, knowing when your nervous system, and you can feel it.
Yeah.
It's, oh my gosh, it's the constant rustling inside, knowing how to quiet that. And some people use exercise, which is also a great way to do it. So it really takes that intentionality and that self-leadership because nobody at this level is going to tell you, hey, you need to slow
What to do.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. No, that makes sense. And again, those moments of that pause and that intentionality of really knowing what's really going on with you, because nobody else can tell you, well, this is kind of what you said, right? This is the healthy boundary. Oh, your body and your system knows it the best. So, and I see this play out all the time in my work with leaders as well. One thing that comes to mind is I was working with a leadership team recently where everything looked high performing on the surface, right? But internally, they were dealing with this constant decision fatigue and overwhelm. Teams were having all these conflicts. One department was not talking to the another. And what shifted wasn't more strategy, it was this exact pause. When they started arriving, taking responsibility, and making these conscious choices, right, in those moments, you could literally see the shift from that reactive firefighting all the time, blaming everybody else, to intentional leadership. And that's when culture starts to change, kind of what you said, not from the outside, but really from that intentionality. So I'm curious, have you seen something similar in your teams as well?
Absolutely. And it doesn't, you can pick any role in any place, and I've seen it. I think as a leader and as a more seasoned leader, I used to run that way too, off the chaos and off the craziness that was going on in the shop. But you really have to look at your shop and understand, like, for example, the Cecilia, these folks care so much and so deeply. Everything they do is with urgency. And so for me to come in as a leader and say, we didn't do this and spin them up, it doesn't help. All it does is create more chaos and more problems. Instead, you have to stay, as a leader, you have to stay calm. If you actually want to be able to drive success, figuring out the way to calmness and brevity is the way. And your teams are going to react to it very differently. We don't need to cause more stress when people are already stressed. We can brainstorm with them, we can do other things, but it's also important to teach it. So
Yeah.
I can show it, but if I don't say, hey, it's okay. I know we're all stressed. This is a bad period of time. Let's talk about what we can do and walk people through that. So I think it's incredibly important to slow other people down. And as a leader that's learned some of these lessons, to teach the team as well.
Oh, I love that. And as I was telling you, we need so many more CEOs like you who actually understand the importance of this work because unfortunately, because of our own conditioning, what we have seen around us, a lot of leaders are still in that hustle themselves. And that's why they're not able to create that calm within their teams because, for example, like even the example that you gave us about setting boundaries. So like we were talking about, in the afternoons, if you need to go drop your son off and you have actually been intentional and asked for it and you show up like that. So you're also giving permission to other people around you that they can do that. They can ask for it. And it has these ripple effects that we don't realize when leaders understand that, right? It really creates that permission in the organization. And so one way is also for them to seeing you and you kind of doing these things, giving them permission. But I also feel like many of these young professionals, they feel like, how can I set those boundaries without it being misinterpreted or felt like disengagement that I'm not engaged with my work? So, what suggestions or how do you handle those questions with your team and how do you motivate them to still go forward and take care of themselves?
So I've seen a lot of information actually about this because when I reflect back on my career,
Yes.
earlier in my career, I've, worked really hard, learned a lot. I think the struggle will always be there to get you to the point where it's
Yeah.
time to back down. So you've got to get folks coming out of college. You can't yet say, I have all these boundaries. You do need to have some, but you have to realize coming out, you got to prove it and earn it a little bit. I'm not saying do that the rest of your life. I'm saying establish the credibility, build a reputation, and then you can start kind of saying, here and here are my boundaries. Again, have some basic boundaries. Family comes first, at least to me it does. So those types of things are okay. But you can't be like, I'm only working 35 hours a week because I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. So there's a balance there. I do think the problem is folks go from that young mindset and they just keep
Yes.
building. I did. It was like 40 hours, 45 hours. I felt very important to have calls on vacation and all the things. And there was never a point at which I said, okay, I'm here. I need to step back. The other piece to this is you continue to grow in your career. Not everybody should have access to you. If they do, then you got big problems. And I was told this when I became a VP, but I didn't know how to practice it. I still kept giving everybody access, taking all the calls, doing all the things, talking at night when I should have been at home sleeping or with my family. So I think it is about building that career and building out that journey, but also having realization to know as you go up, you're going to get more credibility, better reputation, and you have to become more thoughtful about things like access
Yeah.
and your boundaries. Nobody teaches that though. So it's like
Yes,
this,
exactly.
this huge curve that just goes
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, and we keep promoting people to some of those roles also, right? Without actually training them the self-leadership. I really think that's one of the biggest issue, even when I was an HR leader for all this long, right? There are many organizations who are not really being intentional about that. They think like somebody is a great individual contributor, there's going to be an amazing manager, which is a completely different mindset and a completely different skill set that you need. And you need to be taught some of these things, which unfortunately are not built into our L&Ds or any of those. We're still doing trainings that we were doing 15 years ago, which are not helping us at this point, right?
No, nope. And I can tell you different levels require different training. And to your point,
Yes.
they're not built. And so it's, especially when I went from an executive director to a VP level at a big organization, that came with a lot of politics and a lot of unexpected things that I would have never seen. So it would have been great if somebody could have said, hey, politics revs up by like 90% when you go from here to here, because then I could have at least been expecting it. So even the basics of communication would be
Yes.
great. But I
Yes.
also would say for smaller organizations, especially, you generally see folks that have been working there a long time and then just gotten promoted because of their seniority or because they're a great individual contributor. You definitely see that in sales, but I've seen it across the board. And it's important if you're a leader of one of those organizations, you have to figure out how you can develop your leaders. Because if not, to your point, they're not going to be good leaders and your people are going to leave,
Oh,
which is
absolutely.
not the output you want.
Yeah, that makes sense. And honestly, when that clarity comes in, even as a leader who are, managing all these teams, decision actually get cleaner, not harder. So it makes a big difference. So let's pivot quickly to your second TED Talk, which also have some great messaging in it. And I love it because I've had several conversations here with other leaders, and it's so pivotal right now with everything going digital, AI, right? And that human connection is missing. So your second TED Talk, which is the art of looking up, you really talk about that human connection as the most valuable currency, right? So, like I said, in a world driven by AI, data, and speed, how does a leader intentionally create that real human connection inside specifically a high performance organization, which is moving so fast?
So it's not always easy. Sometimes it
Yes.
is, but you have to
Yes.
look up. And that's why I started with the art of looking up. You have to look up and at the person, whether it's over a Zoom session, whether it's over a call, whatever it may be, you've got to pay attention to them. So if you're on the phone, stop multitasking and actually listen to what they're saying. You have to learn about that person. You have to learn what they like, what they don't like. Some people think small talk is ridiculous. And I will be honest, I'm not like, if there is no meaning, I don't love small talk, but it's important. You have to understand what are people's families like? What are the dynamics? What is their life like? What motivates them? All those types of things are really important as a leader for you to know to be able to self motivate or to be able to motivate them in the future. And so it's really about, again, bringing a lot of intentionality to conversations, to understanding your folks so you know how to motivate them, and then finding ways you can lift them up. So you will hear look up, listen big, and lift up. Look up's obvious. It's great if you can actually be in person. I do talk about that in my TEDx as well.
Yes.
Nothing beats in-person time, but it's hard. In this day and age, it's still difficult. I would say even in the position I'm in now, we're very remote. But as I've met people in person, I'm like, doesn't feel like I'm just meeting you. Like, so I think it's really about having the dialogues, making the time to make them seem important to you. And obviously, they should be important to you as well. So it's about those times. I talk about one story where I had an incredibly high performer that hit COVID and struggled. I mean, just that person had traveled 3 out of 4 weeks, a month. And so having to slow it down, be at home, have all the things that come with being at home all the time was a big struggle. The teammates were calling me every day. hey, I'm really worried about this person. Like, I don't want anything bad to happen and I'm
Yeah,
concerned. And I let it go for a little while because this individual, that's the way this person worked. It would go through ups and downs.
I see.
And so I waited just to see if this was just, it would correct itself. And it wasn't correcting itself. And I called the individual and I said, I'm your boss, but I'm also your friend. And as your friend, if I need to help you go find another job, that's what I'll do. But I need ultimately at the end of the day for you to be okay. And the person needed to go toe to toe a little bit and get some frustration out. We did that. And they turned around, not just
Wow.
because of me, because of the people that surrounded them. I had built a very high performing team that looked after each other, knew where the strengths and weaknesses were, could balance everything back out, and it worked. So
That's
those are the
incredible.
moments that you have to be there for and be a leader for. That's what we're designed to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that AI cannot do, right? That's what's really creating that human advantage of creating that intentionality. And we're coming back to that word because most people assume it will just happen, but it doesn't unless you consciously choose it and you consciously choose to connect and make real connection, not just something superficial. And you can only do that when you actually know the person. I completely 100% agree with you. And kind of what you also said, creating that culture in your team where others notice that they cared enough to pass on the message to you. These things doesn't happen by accident. It really happens and it comes from top down because the leader is creating that atmosphere of, yes, we're going to achieve great things, but not at the expense of one another. and
That's right.
and that tells a lot about how a leader is actually leading, and that is the kind of leadership we need today, right? So I really believe in human sustainability, and that's part of the core work, right? While I left my job and I'm starting all of this and doing this work, because what we are doing is not sustainable. And you have worked across Fortune 500 startups, including your current role now as a CEO. Where do you see leaders and managers struggling the most right now from your vantage point?
I think it's a lot of what we talked about. Like
Yes.
it's oh, you have good results. Oh, you need better results next quarter. Oh, these are okay, but you went down a little. There's going to be ups and downs. And I
Yes.
think we've been built to think that there's not going to be ups and downs. So when you are a high performing leader and you see those dips, immediately you're struggling because you're like, oh gosh, I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And
Yes.
I think there's a big part to that. The other piece is the pace, just how quickly things are moving. People forget about things like culture. They don't focus on things like culture. They don't focus, to your point, with AI and everything else. People do not focus on the person in front of you. And I will tell you, my career has been made. I was in technology for 15 years, but technology did not make my career. People made my career. The ones that saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. And the only way that happened was through genuine connection and conversation. And I think a lot of that's missing just because everything continues to speed up. And so it is very difficult to slow down.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason is also the leader themselves. If they are exhausted and they are not kind of, what we talk about, if their own inner leadership is not developed, they are running in their own life. They are struggling to meet their own ends. So how are they going to show up for the other people? And I think that's number one rule that when I'm talking to a lot of organizations, they sometimes don't get. They will be like, oh, our teams are having all these conflicts. Can you come in and figure out and teach them conflict management? I'm like, yes, we can do that. And we've been teaching conflict management for years, but it doesn't really stick in the moment because the root cause is different. It's not the knowledge problem. Everybody knows how to manage a conflict. Everybody knows how I need to show up, but we don't show up. And that is because we have not built that inner mechanism and that inner capacity. And that is the gap, right? And for some leaders, like, for you, as you've gone through your journey, you have built that organically through, the things that happened in your life and, the intentionality and conviction you brought because you saw something and you made a conscious choice that, I'm not going to show up this way anymore for myself and for the people around me. But not for everybody that happens. And that's why we're stuck in this loop of leaders doing the same thing to their teams struggling, and nobody's showing up for one another. And the real connection, those opportunities, they're missing out on that, right?
I think also it's important as a leader, you have to constantly watch. And don't get me wrong, it can be exhausting, but you have to constantly watch and you have to figure out not just the things that were done that were good for me, which there were plenty, but
Yes.
also when I had leaders that did not serve me and did not serve my peers, picking up on what those things are and being able to make that shift in yourself
Yeah.
is important. You being a recorder or a microphone to somebody else's leadership style is not going to help you level up. It's just going to help you follow and do everything that they do and do it their way. And that is, while it might be a little easier to do, that doesn't get you very far.
Yep, yep.
Stay in that person's shadow for as long as you'll allow it.
No, that makes perfect sense. And you mentioned about this person who your team saw, and you also knew, right? There was this intentionality again. You knew that this person has these phases. So you've paid attention for you to actually notice those things. But if you are giving, to other women leaders and leaders here who are listening, what are some of the signs that leaders can watch out for when someone is successful on the outside, but they're running really on empty internally? If you can share any of those for them.
Yeah, I think part of it is, unfortunately, a lot of us do some work on vacation. That
Yes.
happens. But when you feel like you have to work on every vacation and you have to be present constantly, that's a problem. If you're saying things like, I only take a week off a year or I only take 2 weeks off a year, that is a problem. When you see somebody on and leave in Teams messages at 6 a.m. and then you see them on at 12 o'clock and, leaving messages, not only are you seeing that, your teams are seeing it. I've had teams of others say that to me. Well, clearly you responded to a message on our day off or a holiday, and so you must work like XYZ leader and work all the time too. And that's another thing you have to be very cognizant as you rise, whether it be at a VP level or further up, and even before that, people watch you all the time. So everything you do is highlighted. So you have to really be like, okay, do I really want to set this impression? Sometimes you won't have a choice, but if you can be more intentional about those things, but those are the indicators. Are they apologizing for having to be with their family? I've seen that too. Oh, I have
Yes.
to take XYZ to this thing and it's going to take me 2 hours and I really don't want to. I clearly have to do that all the time. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like, go do it. But when you see that nervousness around some of those potential pieces, it's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And how do you build a culture where people take ownership? Because that's the other one that we hear as leaders a lot, that my teams don't take ownership, or my managers. So how do you build that culture where people are taking ownership instead of operating in that survival mode, both for, themselves and for people around them?
It is a constant bump up to the top. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And there's so many people, burnout is such an interesting term because so many people don't believe it exists. I did not believe it existed until it happened to me either. So some of it is about saying, calling them out. Hey, so and so, like, you're back at it again. You really need to slow down. Like, I'm telling you, I know you don't think this is real, but it's a reality. You need to slow down. So it's constantly bumping it up to them, but it's also talking to their directs or their directs to say, we can't run this way. We can't operate this way. You're all exhausted. You're all spinning. You're tired. Like, what is it helping? Like, how are we able to do what we need to do to deliver to clients in the ways that we need to? You can't. So it's showing up that way. And I'm getting ready to take a couple of weeks of vacation. Never taken 2 weeks of vacation in the middle of the summer, but I'm getting ready to do it. And I've been told by multiple people this needs to happen in our culture to make sure that people actually take care of themselves. And so while I don't take vacation a ton, you have to show it. You have to remind the people around you to do it. And then you have to show up for the people underneath them to say, so and so took this. You also need to make time for yourselves. Oh, you need to show up for your family. Oh, being so stressed and spinning is not helping us get anywhere. Like, everybody take a deep breath. So it's all those things, as women, things never stop for us. It's a constant grind, whether it's my 12-year-old's homework or my 26-year-old's her nervous system because she's in pharmacy school, graduate school. We don't get a vacation. So we have to remind ourselves and remind others because every other woman is the same.
That's right.
You got to stop.
That's
It's
right.
okay to take care of your family. Work's going to be here. Come back and do what you need to do. And also, we have to take time for ourselves, which I'm terrible at. I'm certainly not going to tell everybody that I am, but it's important.
Yeah, thank you for saying that because I think all of those things matter a lot and we don't take them important, like we don't give them the importance that they deserve, and that makes so much sense. As you were talking, another thing that came to my mind, which is I get this question and just wanted to clarify for the listeners. So Erica and I just talked about having these boundaries, and when you're at vacation, maybe not answering or not answering emails at night. So some people may say, well, that is how I process it, and I Well, use the technology for those things, right? Use the technology where it's worth. You can draft the message, you can schedule, send it, but how you're showing up, these small things that you're doing, they matter. People are noticing kind of what Erica said. So I really just want to point it out there because sometimes we give ourselves excuses. Well, if that's what works for me, well, that's great. Do what works for you, right?
Yep.
But be mindful of how you're showing up and what effect it's having on the people around you because right? If you're doing it at night and you're sending it at 2 a.m., you're portraying something that you may not want to.
That's right. And I think vacation is a great example. Do little things. So if you
That's
have to
right.
check your email, don't check it all day.
That's right.
Check it at night, check it in the morning. There's ways in which you don't completely disconnect, which I don't love. I do believe everybody needs a little bit of time to disconnect every year, but I do think it is totally possible to find ways to do less of it and use the technology. I'm a big poster on LinkedIn. While I go on vacation, I'll schedule all my content, but I'm gonna have somebody else that takes care of my content. Like I'm not doing it. So there's little things like that you can either have somebody else do or you can have technology intercede so that you don't have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Well, I can just keep going with you, but do you have any suggestion or like a final message you want to leave our listeners with today and also share with them how they can reach out to you?
Yeah, I think it's in today's world with the hustle culture, with everything speeding up, we've said it multiple times. It's intentionality, paying attention to the people around you, your direct reports, your family, understanding your body, right? All of it fits together. It's all the intentionality, and you have to actually figure out what to do with it. Don't be like me, where I kept saying, this isn't sustainable, but I don't know what to do. You can't ignore it. It's not, your body's only going to let you ignore it for so long, and your family can only ignore it for so long. So at some point, you have to be very intentional about your behaviors, how you take care of yourself, which is super important, but also how you take care of your teams. Because at the end of the day, I believe culture matters a lot more than anything else because I believe if you have a good culture, it drives results that are unbelievable and sustainable for very long periods of times. When you just rush and race, you burn people out, they leave, and there you're left with a big void. So at the end of the day, personality and self leadership wins. Make sure those boundaries are up where they need to be so that you can make it sustainable.
Well, thank you. And I guess they can reach out definitely to you on LinkedIn, but if there is anything else you want to leave them with,
I have a website, erika-glenn.com. You can also feel free to send me a message there, but would love to have you on LinkedIn or Instagram. I don't do as much on Instagram, but I'm out there too.
good. And we'll have all this information in our show notes as well. Well, again, thank you for this conversation. And if there is one thing this conversation brings into focus, it's this, just to bring this all together for all of you, that success isn't just about what you build on the outside. It's about what you're anchored to on the inside. Because without that clarity, without that pause, it's very easy to keep achieving, keep delivering, keep pushing, and still feel like something is missing. And what I loved about this conversation with Erica is how it all comes back to intention. Understanding what enough means for you, having the courage to ask for what you need, choosing connection in a world that's constantly pulling you in every direction and all these distractions. Because at the end of the day, leadership isn't tested in your best moments. It's defined in the moments of pressure, conflict, and uncertainty. And in those moments, most people operate on autopilot. Their inner technology takes over. But the leaders who truly stand out are the ones who know how to pause, reset, and choose differently. And that's what it means to lead from within. Because here's the reality, you can't keep making withdrawals from your energy, your time, your attention without ever checking what's actually in your account. And the moment you start doing that, the moment you arrive, take responsibility and make a conscious choice, everything about how you lead begins to shift. Thank you again for sharing your leadership wisdom, Erica, and your personal journey with us, which was so inspiring. And to everyone else listening, take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.
So that's it for today's episode of our Boss Brain podcast. Head on over to Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes will win a chance in a grand prize drawing to win a $25,000 private VIP day with Pallavi herself. Be sure to head on over to her bossbrainpodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Pallavi's gift and join us next time.